Hey friends, I'm Sharon Betters, and this is the Help and Hope podcast produced by MARKINC Ministries. Did you know that 48.5 million couples globally experience infertility? That is mind-boggling. And I would say that probably we all know someone, or we are that someone who has struggled with infertility. And if there was ever a life crisis where someone needed help and hope, I think this is the pathway, because I have friends who are struggling and to this day are struggling. And I know that it can be a really painful and sometimes lonely pathway because if you never experience something, it's hard to get inside the heart of someone who is experiencing. And so that's why I am so grateful to introduce you to Lorie Roe, who is going to tell us about her journey with infertility. And I know that you are going to be so encouraged. And I'm so excited that Janie Ann Wilson, who many of you know is my sister, is joining us as a co-host because we have both known Lorie since she was a little girl. And it's so incredible to see where God has brought her and the message of hope that she has. But she's transparent. You're not going to hear a rah kind of a message. You're going to hear the heart of this woman who has experienced God's presence in amazing ways. So Lorie, thank you so much for joining us for this Help and Hope podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, Lorie, I have kind of told your story in a nutshell, but I want to hear, and Janie Ann wants to hear from the beginning. How did God bring you to the place where you are right now? And I know that we could just talk for days about that, but I'd like to hear about some of the high points of your journey. I remember you sharing with me as a very young child, not I say child, but you were a teenager, a young woman, that you would not be able to bear children. And I cried tears over that because I could not believe that God was placing you on that pathway because of your love for children. I mean, you took care of our kids, for your love for Jesus, all of it. It didn't make sense to me. So tell us a little bit about how that happened and how the process impacted your family and you.
Okay. Well, I will begin by saying it's incredible to sit down with the two of you because you have known me since I was a little girl. Since I was like 8, when I first knew Jesus loved me and I loved him. You have gotten to watch me grow in Jesus. You've watched me learn about what my gifts mix were. You've watched me use them in church setting. And one of those gifts definitely was, as you said, was working with children and loving children. And infants, young kids, I loved them and they loved me. Their moms just intrinsically knew that they were good with me. And I loved helping those moms. And it was before junior high, which is how I first met Jane Ann. In junior high, she was my junior high leader. And I first learned that there was something called maternal child nursing. And I remember learning that was such a thing. And I thought, oh, Lord, this is what you want me to do. I mean, it combines what I love and something that I desire to do. And I could truly, bring you so much glory by doing this. And as I grew, as you guys were watching me grow, those gifts and those desires grew with me. And when I came to the summer before my senior year of high school, that's the journey that I was on, looking at colleges, like where can I go to nursing school? What can I do? Looking at the University of Delaware's nursing program, applying for scholarships. But that same summer, I knew that there was something not right with me. And I went to my doctor and my doctor agreed. And so that also became the summer of blood tests, ultrasounds, scans, all of these things. And all of that led me to September 14th, 1992. I was sitting in a GYN specialist's office, and he, as gently as he possibly could, tried to explain to me my diagnosis, and that meant that my ovaries were completely dysfunctional and would always be completely dysfunctional, that I needed to be started on hormone replacement therapy right away, and that I would never conceive a child. And ladies, 30 years, and I still cannot find the words to describe that moment. Just heartbroken. I can still see the doctor's face. I can still hear how quiet the room was. I can still hear my mom starting to cry. And I just remember going, oh, Jesus. I mean, that's all there was, oh, Jesus. And I couldn't cry. I remember finally coming home and going up to my bedroom, and then I finally did cry. And I just totally, God, you have to help me. And looking back on my journal, and I did bring a whole bunch of my journals, and I'm going to share with you a few of those things. But looking back on my journal entry from that day, I am amazed at how God met me right in that place, in that moment. And I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but I'll read part of it. Okay. Well, today my nightmares came true. I found out that I would never be able to have children. I will never know the feeling of having a little life grow within me, or the kick of an infant from within. I feel empty and heartbroken. I used to think while holding someone else's baby, I can't wait to have my own baby. Now my wait will be forever, and I'll always be holding someone else's baby. I realize that God has a reason for everything, and that I can't understand these things. I'm just crying for the baby that I will never have. Jesus, I pray that you will make my mother's heart content. It has always had a love for children and dreamed of its own. I pray that I will accept this, and your will guide me to understanding your higher purpose. Please help me. And then I have Romans 8:28. It says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him and who have been called according to his purpose. Mm-hmm. I wish I could tell you I stayed there.
Well, Lorie, I think that was not very long after that you came to see me, because I had gone to the University of Delaware in nursing, so you wanted to be on that path, and we were experiencing some secondary infertility, and so you came to me, and I remember the shock. I couldn't imagine you not having babies. And so reliving that it's something you never, like you say, 30 years later, it's still just as devastating. Yeah. But you were someone who had such a deep faith, even at that young age. You were, I never questioned like, oh, is this going to rock her to the point of, she's going to turn from her faith or anything. You were so strong in your faith. And yet.
Yeah. Yes, and yet.
Did you experience the anger and the bitterness?
I think that's what I'm saying when I look back and I read that, and I know that that's not where I stayed. It reminds me a lot of when in Matthew, I think it's Matthew 14, where Jesus is walking across the water and to the disciples in the boat, and the disciples see him, and Peter says, if it's you, Jesus, call me to come out. And Jesus calls him to come out, and and Peter steps out of the boat looking at Jesus and starts walking on the water towards Jesus. And he's doing it until he takes his eyes off of Jesus, and suddenly he sees the water, the waves, the wind, and starts to sink. And I was sinking. Lord, what am I supposed to do? Here I am, applied to the University of Delaware. I've had early acceptance at the University of Delaware's nursing program. I'm a finalist for this huge scholarship from the Delaware Hospital Alumni Association. And how can I ever be a nurse? I certainly can't ever be the nurse that I thought that you wanted me to be. husband. My heart wants a husband, but how could I ever ask a husband to someone I supposedly loved to share this bitter burden? And then children, Lord, I wanted to have children. And I think that that's the part where it was like a piece of myself, an integral piece of what made me who I am was suddenly gone. And I think that that is the thing with infertility. It not only shattered my dreams, it directly attacked my identity, my sense of self-worth. And never, I had walked with the Lord long enough that I never doubted that God was God. I knew God was God. I had gone through a couple of hard things with him, nothing ever like this, but enough to know you are real, you are there. But what I struggled immensely with was his goodness. How God could this ever, how could it ever work out for good for me? How could you create me with such a heart to desire children and to help other mothers have children, and then allow this to pass through your hands? I was a senior in high school. I was deeply struggling under the weight of this. I was started on hormone replacement therapy, and I did not handle it well. I was sick. And so you started to hear entries like this one. I'll read to you this one. And this is March 3rd. Depression has become my unwelcome but constant companion. It haunts my every waking moment. Each new morning it returns to suffocate me, and in the evening it is still with me. It shadows my every move. Fear and doubt have become my mighty foes. They surround me, and I feel lost in their oppression. I fight them, but it's a darkness that just has taken over my very thoughts. Lord, only you can save me. Your power alone can defeat this darkness. I need you. I pray on my knees and petition you to break this hold upon me, but only thing I feel is more darkness. God, please use your power to sear through this darkness that's around me. My God, I need your light. Please, oh Lord. And there were entries like that. And there were also the days that went without entries because my thoughts and my feelings were just so overwhelming that I couldn't even put them on paper. And that was when my mom encouraged me, you need to talk to someone. And it can't be me because I'm overwhelmed. She was in sorrow for this too. And that was when I showed up on your door, Jaden, a very broken and hurting teenager. Very, very much so. Yes.
Yeah. So you went through the darkness. You went through the horrible emotions and the devastation. How did God comfort you? Because I know he did. But how did that happen?
Yes. One of the ways was you. And I think I remember sitting at your kitchen table, and I remember you telling me, Lorie, the Lord loves you and he is going to be faithful. I know that you cannot see that now, but God is going to be faithful. And I remember thinking, yeah, okay. Easy for you to say, Janan. You know, like you've got an incredible husband in the room next door. Little Elizabeth and baby Mark are tucked in bed upstairs. But at the same time, there was a part of me that knew your words were coming from a heart that had to surrender its own dreams and that had walked with God through darkness and found him faithful. And because of that, I could listen. And I don't know if you remember, but here we go, 30 years old, and I'll read it. Dear Lorie, although feelings are not truth, they are a part of life. And sometimes, if we let feelings build for too long, they start controlling our thinking and behavior. So try to let out some of those negative emotions in safe ways before they get too heavy and hazardous. Put this somewhere as a reminder when the time comes that you need to talk. And it says, love, Jane Ann, and it has her phone number on it. 30 years later, she also gave me this devotional that I have worked quite through incredibly often in the past. And those were, I think they were starting to be, even as the book says, like streams in my desert. The Lord helped me get through high school, in part with Jane Ann's prayers for certain and others, and the continued encouragement of God's promise. And I ended up going to the University of Delaware's nursing school. And I remember my second year of nursing school, I had a required maternity clinical that I had to do. It was one of those things that you had to do as you were going through nursing school. And it was incredibly hard. I actually have, we're moving on to a new journal. I actually have the day that I helped deliver my first baby. It's October 13th, 1995. And this was in my nursing clinical. And it says, on October 4th, I helped deliver my very first baby. What an incredible experience. It was an 8-pound, 3-ounce baby boy named, we'll say John Doe. He was beautiful. Time seemed to stop. And suddenly there was a new life out in the world. Wow, I got to help a mom with her contractions and watch the entire thing. And I'm not really sure what God is doing to me. I absolutely love maternity, but I just don't think I can handle it. Part of me says yes, while another part says no. I'm just not sure. Could I spend my life delivering other people's children, watching their joy when the child is born? I just don't know. And as we all know, there's lots of types of nursing. And ultimately in nursing school, I went on the critical care tract, which on a little side note, my future husband, Chris, actually went on the critical care side track too. And that's where I started going, okay, maybe this is where, God, you got me headed. And throughout college and also those first years out of college, I knew that God was consistently calling me to give him my whole heart and to surrender my dreams to him. And that was counterculture then, still counterculture, because we're supposed to follow our heart. We're supposed to make our dreams come true. And here God is telling me, no, give it to me. Trust me. And, and of course, my heart is screaming, trust you? Are you kidding? Like, how can I trust you? You have shattered both my heart and my dreams. How am I supposed to do this? And yet consistently through his word, that's what he was calling me to do. And I'll just paraphrase several of the ones that really spoke to me. Psalm 139, Lorie, I have created you. I have knit you together in your womb. I know every single one of your days. 1 John 4, 9 and 10. I love you so much. I sent my son for you. You are not going through this alone. I am with you. The rivers are not going to overwhelm you. The fire is not going to burn you. Isaiah 43. And all the way, Lorie, I can do immeasurably more than ever you could ask or imagine. Ephesians 3. And those are only a few of them. There's so many others that God was using. But Psalm 18, 28 says, O Lord, you have kept my lamp burning. My God has turned my darkness from light. And that was the honest truth. Like that, his promises, his word were the only light that was in that darkness. And I have to be honest and say that there were a lot of days when I couldn't hold on to those myself. Like I couldn't, I needed someone else to pray for them and speak those into me. And then there were days when I could have, but I really chose to sit in the hurt and to sit in the fear and the anger, all of that. And then there were other days when I could victoriously hold on to those and walk in those. And sometimes all three of those happen before lunch, you know? But
Right.
I think that the important thing was that God was with me through every single one of those and loved me and held me and worked me through them over and over again.
Lorie, what I'm hearing you say is that this is a marathon, not a
Yeah.
sprint. And I was going to ask you, but I think I know the answer. Was there one moment where you thought, all right, I'm going to surrender? I am surrendering to God's purposes, or was it a process?
It was an over and over and over again. And I think, like, part of, as I'm talking, you've already heard, I've now gone through high school. I've now gone through nursing school, and still there were days and moments that were filled with victory. And there were days and moments that were just plain ugly. And that was, I mean, we're already racking up several years, you know? So it was definitely, it was a marathon. It was not a sprint. And through all of that, life was happening, you know, like I graduated college. Here I am, Lord, where do I go to work? You know, and God did guide me to a neurosurgical intensive care unit, that I worked in, and I worked in for the next 3 years. But I did see that over time, my prayers changed. When I look at my journals at the beginning, it's filled with, God, just show me your will, and let me know your plan. And part of that was, I was at crossroads in my life and I needed to know, but part of it was also, I need some control here, God. Like, I can't be blindsided again, you know? But as time was moving on, I was seeing my prayers changing to, instead of show me your will, show me you. Show me more of you. I want to know you more. And it is so important to say that didn't happen overnight, that was steadily happening. In fact, another journal here, hang on. And this is 8/1/97. So if you think back to, we're September of 92, I was diagnosed, and here we're now at 8/1/97. And I have, as I look back over the years, I'm amazed by the rivers we've crossed and the mountains we have scaled. How very foolish I am to fear or contemplate the rapids that might lie ahead, or the mountains around the bend. To the one who controls the tide and forms the mountains, with his hands I will give my trust. And I do want to say that entry, that was a victory moment, you know, that those victory moments still had struggling moments. But it was over time that the darkness, the heaviness, the having to come every single moment to bring that to him, suddenly, slowly, there was more light. And instead of being every moment that I needed to say, God, help me, because here's this hurt again, it became moments. And some of those moments were predictable. Like, for instance, I would receive an invitation to a friend's baby shower. That's a predictable moment, you know? Yes, here I am, Lord, again. I'm hurting, and I'm bringing you my broken desires, my broken dreams. Again, I'm laying them back at your feet. Holding a baby, and someone saying, oh, Lorie, just wait until you have one of your own. There's nothing like it. Predictable moment. Like, okay, Lord, here I am again. I'm crushed yet again. You got to help me because I'm hurting. But then there were moments that you really couldn't plan for because they would just come out of nowhere. And it was, once again, consistently needing to carry it and surrender it and say, Lord, here it is. It's yours again. I'm consistently having to bring it over and over to you. And him having to meet me there in that place.
Lorie, we hope that not only will those who are hurting listen to this podcast, but those who desire to help the hurting will. And so you mentioned that was hard when people would say, I mean, not knowing innocently, I'm sure, what your situation was, but were there specific things that people did or that were hurtful or helpful? How would you suggest that a friend would come alongside someone with your hurt?
You can't fix it. You can not fix it. You can cry with them. You can remind them of who they are as a daughter in Christ. You can recall for them God's promises. There's a quote, and I have no idea who said it, but it says, a friend knows the song in my heart and sings it to me when my memory fails me. And you can be a friend who sings those promises and praise those promises over your friend. You can reflect God's character and meet them with grace rather than condemnation, and continue to call them. And I think that that's where Jane Ann reflected God's character to me, in that it was a safe place to be broken, but yet it was also a place where I was always going to hear about his promises. And I think that's the best way that you can be a friend. And also recognize you're going to open your mouth and put your foot in. Like, it's going to happen. Like, as we love people, it's going to happen. But be able to say, you know what? I thought about what I said to you, and I am so sorry. Please forgive me. And if I do say those kinds of things again to you, can you please just be honest with me and tell me that I did that, and so that I can work on those things, because none of us are perfect. None of us are going to love like God, but we can reflect his love and grow in that. And I think, that brings me, actually that will bring me to August, summer of 1999 in my story was when I first started to date my husband. And up until that time, I had wanted a relationship, but I found myself mostly putting guys who were interested in the friend zone out of fear. When I did finally date, if a guy, I truly could tell this person really wants a family, I'd find ways to shut it down before it ever even got far enough. And then Chris happened, which is a story in and of itself. But I loved him, and I knew I loved him. And I was like, Lord, how do I tell this man that I love that I can't have children? And it's also in a journal entry, but I'm not going to read it for y'all. But on August 1st of 1999, Chris first told me that he loved me. And I answered with, no, you don't. To which he said, yes, I do. And I said, no, you can't love me because you don't really know me. And then my husband, which has a gift for cutting tense situations with a joke, said, what, are you like a secret agent or something like that? Like something silly along those lines. And then he looked at me very seriously and said, you can't have children, can you? And I cried. And he said, I love you, all of you. And when I finally stopped crying, I was like, how did you know that? Because even earlier in the day, he had been joking with me that if we ever had children, we would have red-haired children because we both have red hair in our genes. And I knew he would have never been that cruel. You know what I mean? So I knew he didn't know. So I said, Chris, how did you know? And he said, I just knew. I suddenly knew. It was like someone whispered to me, even though no one ever actually physically did. God told my future husband what I could not. And I cannot even begin to tell you, ladies, how God worked through Chris's love for me. I mean, it was truly a reflection of God's love and of God's character, because I had already known that I was God's daughter. I was his child. I was saved by grace. But there felt like there was something, I wasn't enough. You know what I mean? Like, infertility had that deep of a, I mean, we're talking 1999, that deep of a hold that I just struggled with that. And suddenly God was showing me through Chris just loving all of me. He was showing me how much more do I, who made you, who sent my son for you, love you. Lorie, there's no but. You are my daughter, and my grace covers all of your brokenness. There's nothing, no buts. And so as you're talking about how God uses others in our lives, like, that is a tremendous step that God just used incredibly in my heart and in my life. Amazing. I still am amazed. Yes.
That is amazing, Lorie. I mean, I'm in tears. I'm trying not to cry because of what I wish we could find the words to help other people understand the glory of intimacy with Jesus. And I think it's a unique journey. I don't think that there is a formula except to participate in the gifts of grace that God gives to us. And so his word, you've mentioned that over and over again. In fact, one of your journal entries, I thought that sounds like a specific psalm. I couldn't remember which one it was, but I thought, I bet you that she was soaking in that psalm. And prayer, you were in constant communion with the Lord, running to him, not away from him. That's genuine lament. And that is a gift. I believe God gives us that as a gift. And he's holding you tightly in his grip. He's not pushing you away. And you knew that. You felt safe with him because of his word, because of what he taught you in his word. And then community. You had a gift of community with your family, with Jane Ann, and others who were around you that were loving on you. And they are, I call the people of God his promise keepers sometimes. They are the ones who can get to us when we're mad at him. And he sends them as his emissaries. And he did that with you. I mean, Chris, what an incredible picture of grace as you've defined it. And I really want to invite you to come back to finish the story, because you have a whole nother huge book that is your life from 1999 to present day. Incredible things that have happened to you, because you have two beautiful children. And I've seen their pictures, and I've kind of followed on Facebook, some of their achievements and what the glory of parenting has been in their lives, and from you and your husband. What an incredible picture of grace. But we have lots of adoptions in our family, and adoption is not for wimps. Parenting isn't for wimps, but just the process of adoption. Our son and his wife adopted a little girl from India, and just what they went through, and not being able to get their hands on that baby that they knew was theirs, that's a story of adoption, I think, and we would love to have you come back for part 2 of that story. But as we're wrapping up, I mean, I just can't stand it.
Because there's so much more that he's done.
Just so much.
I mean,
but I just, to whet the appetite of those who are listening, just if you could just briefly give us a few of the challenging moments in the adoption process, and how those moments, God was already preparing you for those moments through the journey that you have just described. How did that work?
I would have to back up, and I hope that they can edit, because the only reason I would have to back up is because I can't not give God all of his glory, because after 3 years of working in a neurosurgical critical care unit, there were a lot of changes happening. And I was incredibly discontent at the job that I was in. And I looked on the posting board, and the very first posting was for labor and delivery, critical care experience preferred. And I remember coming home and talking to Chris about it, bringing it before the Lord, praying to the Lord, asking people who knew me well, what do you think, and then ultimately taking the job. And over the next 15 years, I loved it. I was able to rejoice with women in the most incredible moments of their lives. I was able to lament and cry with women in the most heartbreaking moment of their lives. And I loved the people that I worked with. And I look back on it, and the only difficulty that I really had in working there was when I was waiting for my children to come home. And it wasn't because I wasn't pregnant. It was that everyone around me had a due date. They knew when they were going to hold their child, or at least had a much better idea of when I did. And as time rolled on, that was so hard. And that brings me to my children, and that brings me to adoption. My husband and I, we did talk about embryo adoption. We talked about adopting eggs. We discussed those, but it was very briefly, because the Lord really put adoption on both of our hearts tremendously. And my Anna came home from, she was put in my arms in China on January 29th, 2007. And then my son, James, was born in Ethiopia, and he was put in my arms December 18th of 2009. And Psalm 113 says that he places the barren woman in her home as the happy mother of children. And yes, he does. And that is not to say that there were not so many struggles, because there were. And that is a whole nother story, of which I needed to actually draw back on my journey through infertility to remind myself to continually give the struggles to the Lord, because he's proven himself faithful, and I can give those to him and trust him with them. But adoption is that is a whole huge story. I will say, recently, my pastor was touching on John 9, when Jesus and his disciples were walking past a blind man, and the disciples stopped, and they said, Jesus, who was it? Was it his parents, or was it him that sinned to make him be born blind? And Jesus said to them, no, it was not this man who sinned or his parents, but the works of God made to be displayed in him. And Jesus went on to heal the blind man. And I look and I see God didn't choose to heal my ovaries. He didn't. But his works were displayed in me through it. And I look back on it and I think, he carried me through darkness. He drew me closer to him. He taught me, he tuned my heart to sing his praise and to seek and trust his promises when I'm laughing and when I'm crying. By his grace and his strength, he restored to me what I thought was forever lost. My husband, my children, my career, my identity as his daughter. He's given me a touchstone to look back on his past faithfulness. And the other thing that I found he's done is has given me a heart to love and to care for others who are hurting. And that's, I think, one of the things that my kids and my husband would even tell you. There's times when we're out somewhere and I know I need to talk to somebody, or somebody will come and talk to me. Sometimes it's even a stranger. And it's only a moment where I can pray with them and encourage them, but sometimes it's longer. I was talking to a friend at the beginning of this week, and she was asking her to pray for this time together. And she was sharing with me how we first met and making me remember. And she goes, "Don't you remember? I came up to you in church and I said, you don't know me, but we have to have lunch because how are you okay? I'm not okay." And I'm like, yes, we do have to have lunch. And we are still talking. Only now we're praying and talking together over about her two sons and my kids. So I just can see all of God's faithfulness on this end from what he's done through my infertility.
Lorie, I usually ask our guests to speak to that one person who is heartbroken because of, circumstances, but I feel as though you have just spoken to that person and you have given such hope and encouragement. And I know Janie and I both would say we resonate with what you're saying. Friends, your journey may not be infertility. It could be the loss of a loved one. It could be the loss of a friendship, some grave disappointment. Jane and I both experienced losses. And yet, as we're listening to Lorie talk, our journeys are so similar in pursuing Jesus and pursuing intimacy with him and through his word, all of the gifts of grace that Lorie has mentioned. That's the pathway. That if you want to know a formula, that's the formula. And then you wait as God grows the fruit that he wants in your life. But keep going to the table and taste and see that he is good. And Lorie, my guest has been Lorie Roe, and I really do hope that she will agree to come back because I think we have a lot more to talk about. But Lorie, God is growing such fruit in you, and we are enjoying it. You are sharing it with us, and there are so many who are going to be touched just through this platform. And I know that you share your story and your hope every day as God opens the doors. But I want to assure you, there's going to be somebody, you may never know who that person is. But at MARKINC, we're looking for that one more person who needs the help and hope of Jesus. And I have no doubt that this is going to be one way of doing it. And friend, if you're that person, I would love to hear from you. And I know Lorie would love to hear from you to share how God is using her story, just like the blind man, for his glory. So thank you, Lorie. Janie Ann Wilson has been my co-host today. I'm so grateful that Janie Ann has been able to be here. She's also one of our Daily Treasure narrators, and she has written for Daily Treasure. So you may think, I've heard that name before. That would be the reason why. I'm Sharon Betters, and this is the Help and Hope podcast produced by MARKINC Ministries. Thank you so much for joining us. If you go to helpandhopenow.org, that's helpandhopenow.org, you will find a website filled with stories like this, as well as many other great resources designed to help us walk by faith. Or you can download our free app, Help and Hope. Just go to any app store and look for Help and Hope. And make sure you allow for notifications so that you're alerted every time we have a new resource. Again, I'm Sharon Betters. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to being with you again.